Welcome to the Tim Castle Show, where I sit down with courageous individuals doing inspirational things around the world. Whether it's AI, crypto, mindset, leadership, negotiation and sales, I've got you covered. I sit at that nexus of disruption and change. I'm loving every second of this. I really do believe this is the most abundant time that we've lived in. And if we harness what's going on correctly, we can build businesses that are going to transform our future and your lives. So come with me on this journey, meet the people. I pull back the curtain, I find out who they really are. I started off building this podcast for my sons as something they could look back on later in life and see the conversations that their dad had with people that he respected and admired, but most of all, get the lessons. And now I'm sharing those lessons with you and the reasons that people have done things, the ambition, the passion, and the hardship and their vulnerabilities. And I actually really enjoy it. This is one of the most special times as I get to sit down with people that I really would love to chat to and ask them the questions that are burning in my mind. If you are the same as me and you're pushing the limits and the edges of what you do, please like and subscribe to the show. It helps me tremendously to get new guests on the show and expand that reach so we can help more people together. Siew Ting Foo, thank you so much for coming onto the show. You're a global CMO, HP, Diageo, Mars. You've had a huge background in marketing. You're a powerhouse and a purposeful CMO, which is why I really have been looking forward to this conversation with you today. So thank you again for joining us on the show and discussing all things agentic.
Thank you. My pleasure and honored to be in this podcast with you, Tim.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I want to call out and make sure we call out, you are a best-selling author, and I'm a big fan of your book, Building Brands with Soul. So for everyone there, I'm also wearing a red shirt for those that can see me to obviously big up the book and the brand on trend.
Thank you. Now you're making me feel bad. I'm not wearing my own brand color, but
Are your nails red? I can see red nails.
oh yeah, my nails red.
There we go. But what I love about it is this concept of human-centric transformation. And the fact is you have been building brands with soul for a long time. I'd say everyone who is in marketing should go out and get that book. Everyone who isn't in marketing should also go out and get the book, because the lessons and the vulnerability that you share, as I've said on LinkedIn about this book, is very important for people wanting to be a leader and an expert in the room and to help bring brands with soul and to have soul. I think that's just really, really important. The way you connect it and the stories you tell are very, very powerful.
Thank you. You're making me really embarrassed by giving me such a great introduction. Wow.
That's the sign of a good podcast there, Siew Ting. So yeah, welcome to the show. In this show and in this series, we're going to discuss all things AI, media effectiveness, and the role of innovation that it's going to play, because the velocity of change right now is just incredible. And I wanted to kick things off by getting your perspective on just how brands are using AI currently to enhance their marketing strategies, their processes, and produce results.
Well, I think it has been an interesting 2-3 years of AI evolution. I think when AI first started, I would say that marketing wasn't really the function that jumped onto it quite quickly. I think it's other functions that were, really looking at it. And then it kind of evolved, in the last 1 year and even into now, the entire whole hot topic is about agentic AI. But I think fundamentally, where the areas that marketers are actually most prone to, using AI is primarily in the middle part of the market. I would say the marketing value chain. If you look at marketing value chain, it really starts from insights to targeting to positioning. Then you have the goal 4Ps execution and then going to the market. But I think the areas that marketers are most open to, using AI, at least all the use case I've seen before is very much in the middle, which is very content generation. Given the fact that that is quite resource intensive, but especially for big corporates, but it's also one that could allow automation quite quickly. Then you start seeing AI also getting involved in upstream in terms of turning around of insights. But that often, I think that we, in the market, we still don't have enough predictable models. We still don't have enough trusted LLM. So you have to do that with a little bit of a, clever human intervention. But I'm also seeing at some stage AI going to start involving, especially those brands who are very much has to involve with CX, so customer experience. The whole notion of having chat boxes moving into agentic AI to really help you with your CX experience to really drive a great CX experience. It could be really powerful. But that's kind of my own personal, sense of things. Yeah.
Now, that's a really important point. The fact that, yeah, there's the human in the loop and that's always there. There's almost this hybrid intelligence needed between AI and humans. And at the
Mhm.
same time, there are areas of innovation with CX where you can create efficiencies or Gen AI for creative. So, where are you currently seeing AI used well in marketing?
To be really frank, I haven't seen yet. And I think there are two areas where I think is actually top of mind for a lot of CMOs. One is very much in the governance and risk and ethics area. I think there's a lot of talk about AI and sitting in a CMO position, you're sold to a lot of solutions, but there's not enough governance, ethics, risk implication, which can be quite huge in order to guide, CMOs and marketers make some decisions. So actually, that's a quite big piece of gap. The other one is a very fundamental one. And often the question that I feel that marketers and CMO are being asked is, how do you balance this whole human intervention versus what you want AI to automate? If you look at the end-to-end, value chain, and that marketing as a craft is not just science, it's just not data, it's really also art. And great work and great brands, actually the art element and the judgment element and the creativity element is really important. So the questions very much lies onto then a marketeer's judgment or CMO judgment to say, hey, against the entire value chain, what are the tasks I want to automate? What are the tasks that I don't want to automate, but I want to ensure that the ingenuity of human intervention, the human creativity stays true to that. And then the third piece, which is very critical, is there's this whole rush to do AI, but there's not sufficient help given or not in the market in terms of, so how do you shift the role of marketing organization? What does future of marketeers look like? What are the skills they need to have? What kind of capabilities should you really build into the future? And actually, these are really big questions, and no one agency is looking at that or consulting firm is looking at that, and often I think it's left to the CMOs, own vision to really drive that. And I feel that a lot of why some CMOs are still holding back is because of this whole organization implications, and also this whole human versus AI balance is really what's holding them back. Yeah.
Oh, wow, Siew Ting, I feel like I'm learning so much already. This is brilliant insights. Yeah, no, this is great. And good to challenge the narrative, right? Because there is a lot of chatter around AI or agentic and all of these evolutions, and just to kind of put it out there as to what is useful. And as a CMO, use your experience and intuition to guide the process to say, this is where AI would be most valuable or agentic would be most valuable to
Yeah.
create. And this is what I want to retain control of right now. So,
Yeah.
are there any downsides to AI and LLMs?
I think there are. I think that it's really going back to what you're using it for. So what's your it's starting fundamentally that you know I mean marketers shouldn't be taking this as a new thing. It's like the next new shiny thing, right? But more looking at back and literally say, how would AI help you do what you're supposed to do as a marketer and the marketing fundamentals really well? For example, marketing fundamentals is to deliver growth and and actually acquire more customers. by doing your 4 Ps. I'm saying 4 Ps in a simplistic way, really, really well. So how do you go back to become your fundamentals become better and actually have more impact and actually more effective because of AI? I have seen cases, and even I make this mistakes myself, was a lot of people were jumping into AI purely because they were going in as efficiency to drive the better productivity versus how do you look at AI very strategically and say, how does it create value for yourself as a marketer and also your impact as a marketer, and how do you drive growth? I think framing the questions quite intentionally is going to be really, really important. I think that's one upside of what I learned recently from some amazing great leaders is that we know that AI is coming to play, and our future in 3 years' time, or they've even there's this whole thing that from generative AI now is agentic AI, and this whole speed is going to be in 2 years' time or in 3 years' time, right? That's what Silicon Valley talks a lot about it quite quickly. So I think the good thing about AI now is and agentic AI is that you get information much faster, and the turnaround of information much faster. But then how do you use intuition? Because as leaders, sometimes it's about judgment and intuition. How do you always when do you use intuition? When do you not use intuition? Becomes a very important thing. And then even also, how much do you rely in AI, right? If you over rely on AI and LLMs and everything, very soon human beings will stop thinking and they don't have judgment. So it can go both ways.
Yeah, and that's super important. We don't want to be outsourcing our skills. We want to
Yes.
be investing in our skills for the future and not just saying we're going to take the shortcut through AI. I think that's a really important point that you made around not just using AI willy-nilly, but knowing why you're using AI or agentic. So that
Mm,
going back to the root cause of the question, because if you don't, then there will be a downside because you're not just using it for AI's sake because it's the
mm,
new shiny thing. You're
mm,
using it to create value and growth. And I love that. I absolutely love that. That's a really important point. So
mhm.
everyone's really worried about being replaced by AI. There's another kind of spin on the topic, right? How do you see that actually unfolding within marketing?
I think without a doubt, AI is really disrupting industries. And I think that we're seeing that within the marketing field. Give and the industry is being disrupted quite a fair bit, especially within the advertising and the media space. Given the broad landscape that you're seeing across the different holding companies, for example, like WPP. So we are seeing that real, and that coming in. I can only mention that from being a marketer and being a previous CMO, is that I think not to fear it, but not to also do it in terms of a perspective that this is a new shiny toy, but actually really to look at it in the face and say, how do you strategically use AI? What does the future of marketing craft and hence organization of future marketing organization needs to look like? And then what kind of skills do you need what is future of market type of marketer needs to become, whereby there is this whole interjection of technology and data and creativity and yet humanity coming to play, and actually kind of face that question head on in terms of people, processes, tools, and really capability. If you approach that and you frame that problem in that way, then you would see that the craft of marketing will still very much be very different, be very similar, as in the fundamentals doesn't change, which is what we learn when we become a marketer, the 4 Ps. The marketing fundamentals doesn't change, but you have to become better at your fundamentals and your craft because you know when to use AI and you know when to use human judgment in that perspective. So I think the last question, in a nutshell, is it's here to stay. It's not like another VR or AR. is here to stay. Don't be afraid of it, but actually face it up front and actually look at it quite intentionally to shape the future of the marketing organization.
Almost lean in and embrace at the
Yeah.
same time, but thinking from that futurist perspective of how you can adapt, how you can tweak things, how you can evolve with it.
Yeah, but not approach it because this is a shiny toy.
Mm,
you know, because everybody is talking about AI, and hence you need to talk about AI, and not approach it as a tactical approach. Because if people who knows AI really well, they will really know that the tool keep changing. There will be tons of AI apps that's coming through, but the big part of it is actually the data that feeds in. If within the organization the data don't talk to each other, you might be applying AI, but you might end up spending more money, right? So being strategic about it is quite critical.
yeah, that's a super important point. Yeah, you might have a bigger problem if you're just
Yes.
super focused on this new shiny toy and not really looking at the organization and how you've structured things and the processes behind it to support the creation of value. So, as a brand, where do you want an agency or your partners that you work with to focus to drive value? If we put our futuristic hats on, like there's a lot changing, as you've mentioned, there's a lot of disruption, there's a lot of consolidation. As a brand, where would you want your agency or partners to focus to drive value? And what are the key priorities you're considering?
I think those three things will be where I want more strategic value beyond giving me a tool. The problem is there's tons of tools out there. There's tons of people coming to CMOs and say, I have this tool. This tool can do this AI. But unfortunately, that tool only answers one part of the value chain. And then the problem then is left with the CMO and literally say, how do you fix everything together? How do you stitch everything together? So there's lots of silo, which is not what we have the bandwidth nor the leeway and the license to do that, right? I mean, the three areas that I would look at agencies and partners is one, first is tell me based on the context of my brand and the environment that we operate in, what part of the value chain of marketing that I need that AI can help me turn around faster, better. Second is, help me with devising future organization and also help me with the reskilling and the building capability of AI because applying AI, there's a big part of how do you mindset change people? How do you make sure that people are reskilled? Actually, that is a bigger problem than just applying AI. It's actually the change management process that often is not taken into consideration. And then the last one is really the governance, the ethics around utilizing AI.
Yeah, some really important points. And that change management piece, that's a kicker, and we often forget that. There's a lot with the disruption comes a lot of uncertainty, resistance to change. Like, how do you manage your people through that and give them the skills to feel empowered and not afraid or enamored either way by these tools? Like you said, like don't get too enamored by it because there's the fundamentals of business are still there. And if you haven't got them sorted out from an organizational perspective, as your org
Mhm.
changes and you go through these times, it's going to become very difficult to get maximum value out of it.
Yeah.
So finally, to wrap this up, and it's been a killer episode, Siew Ting. Like this, thank you so much. This has been just full of insights and value. But do you think about the risks of AI and what should we do to focus on that and mitigate them? And I think you touched on this
Yeah.
briefly with the ethics portion.
Yeah, I think first is the ethics and the governance piece, which I think there is a huge gap. Second is AI, which I think I might be wrong, depending on industry. A lot of AI application fall into the whole area of productivity and efficiency versus effectiveness, and creating value. So in that journey, organizations might end up just using that as a way in to cut off lots more head count.
Mhm.
Um, and they might end up in a situation they might be really, really lean, but then they might be actually losing intellectual property that is driven because of the human and the skills and the longevity of that happening. And we're seeing that in the advertising industries. What I'm seeing, at least from the human capital perspective, is I'm seeing the really, really senior people losing the job, and the entry level people, like those that just came out from grad schools, they don't have jobs, they can't find jobs. Then there's this whole problem of continuity on building areas. Like, for example, I talked to this recently, got to know this really smart AI guy, and then he was saying the industry of law is where AI can be applied very quickly. But the problem is if the legal professions start applying AI and then they start cutting down the entry level, then they'll come to a stage whereby there will not they won't have succession, right? The industry wouldn't have succession, and that's a huge issue in itself. And then the third one is more philosophical and more getting the actions and details. If leaders over rely on AI, if you look at AI yourself and you've practiced AI yourself, and I remember recently I attended a leadership workshop and they're doing an experiment. They asked us to all use, a room of 20 great leaders, and they give us a use case to use AI. The experiment showed that everybody was rubbing into AI. They were all trying the tools, but in that 30 minutes, nobody was talking to each other.
How interesting.
Yeah, nobody was talking to each other. There wasn't conversations. There wasn't communication. Which goes back to my point is then people become over reliant on AI, and then they stop thinking. They stopped, understanding what the craft of the profession they are, and so I think that's why I'm a firm believer of being intentional of what aspect of a what areas of your value chain that you really use AI, and being very intentional around it, and what aspects that you don't use AI. For example, for us in marketing, it will be insights, final insights and judgment of what is that aha killer insight. You don't use AI. You might use AI to help you generate data much faster, but the judgment call lies with the marketer, lies with the CMO. So I think that for me is actually three big pitfalls and big risk. Yeah.
What a brilliant place to end this conversation. And I'm sorry to have to do this because we could go on for hours. You just hit on some incredibly poignant points there. Thank you so much again for coming on. Like, I just want to say a few words that have stood out as we've been having this conversation. And as you've walked us through what's going to happen in terms of the exponential change whilst we face this disruption. And one thing that's super clear that you've really highlighted is that we cannot, at the expense of human capital, totally rely and go all in on AI. There needs to be this hybrid approach. And I think that's really, really important. But thank you so much for sharing your honesty and your value here. And again, I'd say to everyone, get the book because it will change how you approach business and so that you can start building brands with soul. Thank you so much. It was really, really thoughtful. And yeah, let's go make the organization of the future.
All right. Thanks, team.